How you doing, Bruin fans? I hope you're doing as well as the UCLA women's basketball team because they are national champions. The Bruins winning the national championship 79-51 on Easter Sunday, clinching their first NCAA title. Of course, they do have another women's basketball championship, but that was way back in 1978 before the NCAA even sanctioned women's basketball as a sport. I'm Todd Reeves. Glad you joined me here today on this Monday, April 6th. The UCLA Daily Report, part of the Fan Arch Network, and I'm glad you have joined me here today, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And don't forget to like, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and also subscribe or follow if you're on Apple Podcasts, and leave a 5-star review if you're able. So, once again, as we mentioned, I need to list off the 6 seniors because you're going to be hearing these names for years to come when UCLA fans talk about this legendary team. Lauren Betts, Kiki Rice, Gabriela Jaquez, Gianna Neepkins, Angela Dugalich, and Charlize Lager Walker all will go down in history as champions at UCLA. And this was more than just a 1-year journey for this team. This was for some, it was a 4-year journey. Kiki Rice and Gabriela Jaquez have been here all 4 years. And for others, it was a little less long, but still, it was a lot of hard work and dedication from the rest of the seniors to finally climb Mount Everest and grab that national championship banner, because it was a tough go for UCLA women's basketball for a long time. Even head coach Corey Close, who deserves all the credit in the world, who, sat at the side of John Wooden and talked to him at lengths before his passing, has really put together a strong women's team and a women's program that UCLA has not seen in many decades. So it's just a fabulous showing by the Bruins. Last year they got to the Final Four, the first time they had ever been to an NCAA Final Four. Looked like maybe they had a shot at a national championship, and then bam, wham, UConn absolutely slammed the door in their face and blew them out. And you got to give these seniors all the credit in the world because they took that loss, and it wasn't just like okay, we'll just get back to the tournament and we'll do our damage then. No, these ladies, these women dedicated themselves big time. Coaching staff, the players, even the bench players, the support staff, all of them deserve credit for doing what they needed to do as far as from day one of this 25-26 season. They dedicated themselves into winning the title, and finally they have reached their goal. This team won 31 straight games. They started off number one in the country. They had that little loss to Texas, and they were in the top 5 for the rest of the year. Most of the year, they were ranked number 2 behind UConn. A lot of people thought UCLA should be ranked ahead of them because, in reality, when you look at it, their resume was better than UConn's. They had a much tougher schedule and much better wins and many more wins against tough competition. But UConn being UConn and UConn being undefeated, it was just an easy thing to do to put UConn as the number 1 overall seed. But they got beat in the semifinals, and UCLA had to overcome a tough Texas team. Both teams in that semifinal really had a tough time scoring, but you got to give credit to the UCLA defense in that one, holding Texas to only 44 points, including Madison Booker, who was the superstar for Texas, with 3 of 23 from the field. And in the play of the game, when Texas was trying to make a furious comeback down by 3, Booker drove in on Lauren Betts, and Betts swatted the shot. UCLA got the rebound and was fouled with just a few seconds left, and that clinched the game. But UCLA came back and played even a better game against South Carolina, jumped on them from the start, held them to 51 points. I mean, UCLA had more assists, 23, than South Carolina had made baskets, 18. UCLA had more assists than their opponent had made baskets. I mean, that's total domination. They jumped out in front and never looked back against South Carolina. The Texas game was more of a slog. The game against South Carolina in the finals was more of a showcase of how good this team is. They played just a wonderful game, played together. They got 25 second chance points. I mean, they had 5 players in double figures, and I believe the sixth player only had 9 points as far as the seniors go. So it was a balanced attack. This team was not just all Lauren Betts, Lauren Betts, Lauren Betts, who is, if not the best player in the country, she's in the top 2 or 3, and she may not be 2 or 3. But Gabriela Jaquez, as we said, one of the seniors, came through big time with her family watching, including her brother, and we all know who her brother is, old Jaime. With him walking or watching from the stands, she had maybe her best game of her career: 21 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. And after the Bruins turned it over 24 times against Texas, they really did a much better job taking care of the basketball. And, you got to give credit to these players because a lot of them basically took a chance on UCLA, like Kiki Rice and Gabriela Jaquez. This team was not a powerhouse when they stepped in to the squad as freshmen. And then Lauren Betts transferring in was obviously a big step. But you also give credit to Neepkins and Dugalish and Lager Walker, who transferred from other schools where they were the big fish. They could have went anywhere, and been the focal point, the number one player on the team that wasn't going to win the national championship. But no, they had team goals and they sacrificed, became better all around players, and helped the squad basically showcase what they did on Sunday as they absolutely just throttled the Gamecocks. So, uh, major, major, major props to the UCLA women's team. Congratulations. They go out as winners and champions, and it'll be a memory that they'll have for the rest of their lives. And I know a lot of Bruin fans out there, it's not maybe a football championship, and maybe it's not a men's basketball championship, but man, a women's basketball championship is pretty darn close to being up there. And again, give head coach Corey Close all the credit in the world. She took all the teachings from John Wooden when she sat there and listened to all the knowledge that he was able to, share with her. And, she's a huge believer in Wooden's philosophy and the pyramid of success and all that. So it was a long journey. This is, I believe, her 15th year. It took John Wooden 16 years to win his first national championship. It took Close 15 years. So kind of a similarity there. And hopefully, there'll be a few more to come. We can't just, we let's celebrate this one first before we start talking multiple national championships, because this squad obviously is going to have to be rebuilt. But again, that doesn't mean anything today. Today we're talking about the present and the champions, and hopefully they'll have a nice celebration when they get back on campus. It's not a far trip from Phoenix, where they won the championship. So when they get back on campus, hopefully there's a nice big rally celebration for them. And then next year, when they hang that banner, that's going to be a special night as well. So, moving on from uh, women's basketball, let's turn to football and another team that a bunch of Bruin fans hope has a bright future. The football team had day 2 of their spring practice on Saturday. They take a couple of days off in between, or a day off, and then they take a few days off between each practice. And so they practiced their first time on Thursday, second time on Saturday. And I got to give the UCLA program a little bit of credit because me, a few shows ago, I bashed them for not allowing any fans to watch the practices and, giving very limited access to the media, especially for that first practice. But you know what? Credit to the football program and the media relations department and all those guys for maybe seeing a little bit the error of their ways, and they let the media attend the whole practice. It's still not open to the public, but the media got to go in from the beginning and look at the whole practice in its entirety. And so I give credit to the program for doing that, at least that much. If you're not going to let fans in, but at least from all the social media and all the reports out there, we got some good videos, some good information. So again, kudos to the program. But the thing I wanted to talk about was, it seems like, when you listen to the coaches talk after the practices on Thursday, head coach Bob Chesney spoke. On Saturday, Dean Kennedy, the offensive coordinator, and Colin Hitchler, the defensive coordinator, spoke. Those two coordinators speaking after Saturday's practice. And the takeaway I got from that is, it seems like they're focusing more on mental stuff than necessarily physical stuff. Yes, they're teaching techniques and, certain physical things, how to, maybe catch the ball or hand placement when you're blocking or, form tackling, that kind of thing. I'm sure that's kind of stuff's being taught. But it also seems when you talk to these coaches afterwards, it's more mental stuff that they're really focusing on, at least for the beginning here. They're focusing on attitude, effort, leadership, competitiveness. I mean, we talked earlier about the John Wooden pyramid of success. At the very top of that pyramid is competitive greatness. And I think that's something they're trying to instill in this Bruin team. So it seems like, yeah, they're going through, the typical football drills, but they're also looking for, who's going to push through this last sprint, who's going to give everything they have on every little drill, you know, is there leadership being displayed? I think the Kennedy, the offensive coordinator, spoke about the quarterback Nico Iamaieva and a couple of offensive line members that were kind of shouting at their teammates, like trying to get them going through certain drills, through certain things, making sure they were doing everything the right way. And that's kind of something that is what the Bruin coaches are trying to instill in the team, and especially with these leaders. So it seems like at least these first few practices are all about kind of attitude and mental stuff as opposed to physical traits, and because they've been working on some of the physical stuff even before spring practice. And I mean, what I mean by that is like the weightlifting, sprints, conditioning, that kind of thing. Now once they get the pads on, at least some of the pads on, they're talking about, how is the team pushing it mentally? Are they, mentally tough? Are they strong? That kind of thing. So we'll see what happens. But the other good news coming out of spring practice on Saturday was the fact that there were at least 100 high school recruits there in attendance with their families, and they all got to see firsthand how Bob Chesney runs a spring practice, how he runs, how he interacts with the players, how he runs, certain drills, that kind of thing. And the good news was that a lot of them, I saw on social media, a lot of them were talking, and the overall, I think, takeaway from the recruits' mind was that the coaches were very energetic. There was a lot of energy out there. They were enthusiastic about, getting things right and teaching the proper techniques to the players and attention to detail. So, I mean, over and over, when you see these high school players, they really talk about how engaged and how enthusiastic the coaches are as far as teaching the players, and also, um, not necessarily being their friends, but with the players, but the coaches are doing a good job, like really interacting and engaging with the players. So a lot of good stuff coming out from the recruits, and even there were some big time recruits out there that were saying that, oh, I was kind of considering UCLA, but now UCLA has really opened my eyes, kind of thing. So that doesn't necessarily mean they're coming, but at least they're making a really strong impression on these high school recruits. Well, we talked about football. We talked about a national championship in women's basketball. Let's move to men's basketball. Well, there was some news over the weekend, and that was Trent Perry. Trent Perry announced that he will be coming back as well. So all four of the UCLA players from this past season have all intended or say they've intended to come back. It's pretty much a done deal. The only one we're still kind of waiting on is Sky Clark, and that's an NCAA matter. At this point, it might be a situation where Coach Mick Cronin might just have to assume that Clark will not be back. But we got the transfer portal coming tomorrow. It opens up, so it's going to be a huge week this week for UCLA basketball, and of course, we'll be talking all about that. But Trent Perry, who averaged 12 and a half points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists this past season, was probably the most improved player this past season. He from his freshman to sophomore year, he looked leaps and bounds better. His defense was better, and now it looks like that he's going to be the point guard next year. He's going to have the ball in his hands, and he's going to be the one orchestrating the offense. So Trent Perry will be back, and now I think you say with those 4 players back, Xavier Booker and Eric Daly coming back as well, and a couple of the bench players like Eric Freeney and Brandon Williams. with all those guys coming back, it would seem like they have a nice foundation, and now they have to get some big time players in the portal, which hopefully they will do this week. Well, that'll do it for me. Thanks for joining me on this National Championship Monday. The National Championship men's game is tonight, so enjoy that. But who cares about that? Let's enjoy the women's championship, shall we? All right. Until tomorrow, this is Todd Reeves saying so long, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Take care, everybody.